Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday evening chat. I'll be your host. My name is Clyde on behalf of Product People. We're happy to welcome you today or this evening. Um, so just a quick introduction to Product People. So what we do during the day is the hands-on and unglamorous work of a product manager or product owner on an interim basis, usually projects lasting from 2 to 12 months in various industries. We can also make pretty decks, but we like to actually deliver real outcomes. We're currently fully distributed with our base in Berlin, but if you were just listening, we have, I'm in Munich, we have colleagues in Barcelona, Ireland, India, and Romania currently. And then at night or in the evenings, we also do, we host events such as this. Our current product community is going on 5,500 members strong. So we're happy to welcome you today as part of that. Here's a quick overview of clients past and present. As you can see, we've looked, at least for people who are in Germany, you should see some very familiar brands, prop tech, mobility, fitness, e-commerce, etc. And if you are looking for a new opportunity, we are currently hiring. We're actually hiring for 2 roles. One is a more of a lead role that will be hands-on client-facing, but also focus heavily on developing our junior colleagues. And then another more intermediate to senior level role, which will be also, helping our junior colleagues, but more primarily being client-facing and delivering outcomes. So enough about product people. Oops, wrong one. So yeah, once again, thanks for coming. And we're happy to have Asla from Moia, who is a senior PO at Moia, speak to us today about common PM or product management problems, product management mistakes, and falling in love with your solution. So yeah, without further ado, please take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Kite, and I will be sharing my screen and then we can start. Just give me a second. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen.
We're actually seeing slide 13 or 12 or.
Okay, then. Just bear with me. And now you can see the slide, right? Slide for the first one.
Yep.
Cool. And now you should be seeing it full screen, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Then, yeah, so hi, everyone. Welcome to Product People Meetup this evening, and thanks for joining. And thanks for the introduction and also the opportunity to be able to speak to the product community. So today I will be talking about a product manager who fell in love with a problem. And before we start, let me jump to who am I actually, so that you also have a bit of context. So I'm Asli and I am originally from Istanbul, and I have an industrial engineering background. And I have 6+ years product experience as a product manager and a product owner in different industries. I worked in edtech, business intelligence, and also lastly, mobility sector. And currently I'm working as a product owner in Moia, which is 100% subsidiary of Volkswagen. And I'm making cities more livable by ride sharing service of Moia. And there I am responsible for the mobile app for our drivers for the navigation. And also recently, so since last year, I started doing some product management training, so doing some workshops and also boot camps so that I can also share the experience that I gathered over the years. And also I'm a yoga trainer and a travel enthusiast. Of course, the travel enthusiast part changed a little bit with Corona, but with yoga, I'm still in there. And that also helps me to balance out everything that I have on my plate. And I'm also super happy to exchange with all of you. So that's why if you want to also get in touch with me, please, you can add me on LinkedIn that I also shared on the lower corner. And I'll be also sharing some of good readings that I have, and always feel free to reach me out. So let's start. I have an amazing feature idea. So how many of you have actually experienced that? I experience that actually on a daily basis, I can say. It's you take a shower, and in the shower you have a new idea of a feature. You're in ideation session with your team, and there comes all of these new cool feature ideas, or you do stakeholder reviews and interviews, or you talk with your users, and then in every step you have all these amazing cool feature ideas. However, one drawback with this is that feature ideas are actually solutions already. But then why do we jump in to a solution, or why do we actually fall in love with this amazing feature idea? Well, this is how we are wired, basically. Humans are wired to find solutions. Because imagine that is the classic example, you're in the bushes somewhere in the forest, and then you see somewhere a bit further away this tiger or tiger-looking thing moving in the bushes. And then you basically have a millisecond to think about what you can solve. How can you actually minimize your risk and how you can survive? So basically, we are wired to jump to the solution because it actually increases our chance of survival. However, like this is not, when you're in that bush and then you see this moving thing, it will not be that you will just stop and think and take, I don't know, your phone and then search about, okay, I'm in the forest of, let's say, Black Forest. Are there really tigers there? What is the velocity, average velocity, speed of tigers? Should I just run or should I just stand? Can I kill this? You will not have that time, and you have to jump into the solution. However, as product managers or successful product managers, you have to always stand and first understand the real problem before you would jump into that solution. So basically, as a product manager, if you're in that bush, you really have to take out your pen and paper and your phone and try to understand the real problem and what the underlying problem is. But then the question will be, why do we even jump into solutions? Why do we spend so much time focusing on all these solutions before we actually even understand the problem, the real problem? Because first of all, we're humans. We thrive when we have achievements. And every time you have a solution or a feature, you basically have a sense, a feeling of achievement. When you have this really cool solution, when you deliver that feature, you have this, okay, I check, I did this, our team has delivered this feature, then you go into your company or your stakeholder review and talk about it. And that gives us a sense of achievement. Or with some product managers in some organizations, there's actually so much pressure from the organization. It can be your manager, it can be in the department that you're working on, and there's too much pressure to deliver things. And this also pushes a lot of product managers into delivering solutions so fast. And also one of the reasons is sometimes we also don't have enough customer understanding. And I've also heard or seen some examples of that some product managers actually haven't even talked with the user, or maybe just talked with some users, but just few of them, or asked the user researcher or the UX designer to understand, like just do their interviews on the site and then bring them basically the results. And when you actually don't have this face-to-face or like this deep understanding of the real problem of the customers, then we would also tend to jump into that solution instead of trying to understand that problem. And sometimes we don't have enough focus on data analysis because data actually objectively shows where the problem areas are. And then before we would analyze, we just again jump back into this cool feature idea. And one of the last reasons is, I think this is a very common case for a lot of product managers because we juggle with so many tasks at hand that we actually don't even have enough time to focus on that problem area. So that's why we say, okay, whatever, like let's just skip this. I know the solution, I know the feature idea, and now let's talk about how we implement it. However, I mean, this is something that I heard in a podcast, which I cannot remember, so I don't want to take the credits, but actually a successful product manager is the one who falls in love with the right problem and not the right solution. Because as a product manager, one of your first tasks is actually to identify where are the biggest pain points and where are some potential gain points. So where the problem areas are. And the right solution is the next step where you would actually take care with your whole team, with your designers, with your devs, or with your QA. But then the question is, why is loving the problem extremely crucial before jumping into the solutions? First of all, well, you are there to maximize the value of your product. Probably there have been so many situations where you saw a product manager release a feature, or you yourself, where you release and then it doesn't even affect your KPIs, or it doesn't have any influence on the users. Maybe users don't even use that. So you have to find the right point of the problem so that it brings the maximum value to your product. And the second thing is, of course, capacity. I think this is also a very common drawback or a challenge, I would say. We basically have limited capacity, limited resources. You don't have hundreds of devs. And even if you would have, that also doesn't mean that your output or your outcome will be high. And you need to basically make the best use of the resources that you have. That is why you have to find the problem that would actually, at the end, give the biggest impact, so would solve the biggest problem in the product. And the last thing is the focus. Basically, identifying the right problem or the biggest problem will also bring the right focus to your team, and they will not be feeling lost about, like if you would jump in here and jump in there, but they have a clear idea of what this biggest problem of the user of the product is, so that they can actually put their energies to the right thing. So even though in a lot of cases, this basically looks the other way around, actually the ideal case is that 80% of your time as a product manager, you should be focusing on identifying the most impactful problem, the biggest problem that your users have. And then afterwards, you can jump into finding the solution. But that actually, even if you would put so much time in your solution, if it doesn't bring any impact, then the time even you invested in finding the problem basically completely dissolves. And of course, then the next step is how to find the right problem. So we're talking about why it is important, but it is the challenge actually how to find the right problem. So I will bring some points which from my personal experience have the biggest help. And I will also give some quick examples of what I do on a daily basis. First of all, user research. As I mentioned, you have to hear and listen to your users. You cannot use a proxy to understand what the user needs are or the pain problems are. You need to be part of the user research. What does that mean? Yes, you might not have, not every product manager has experience in user research. I personally also have more of a technical background, but still, if you don't have that experience, you can always be sparing partner with your user researcher or your UX designer or whichever team or component is responsible, and just stick with them. Just sit with them. Even if you don't ask questions, listen to what the users say. And take also time to create surveys so that it's only not qualitative, but quantitative feedback that you also receive. And I can tell a quick example. So it also doesn't need to be in a completely planned setting where you have all these questions where you, I don't know, invite people to your office or nowadays online, but you can actually always try to find some users that would use your product. In my previous job, I was working, for those who lived in Berlin for more than 2 years would know, I was working for the scooter sharing company, Coop. And basically what I did is every time I would actually see someone closing the scooter, so arriving somewhere, closing the scooter, I would just go to them and ask, hey, how was your experience with the scooter? How was the experience with the whole app? I'm actually working as a product manager there. And you cannot imagine how much of all these random encounters I had gave me so much input. So if you're working on a product where you know people, or you could randomly find people on the street or on some forums, just go and talk with them. Just spend a little bit of time. And what I'm currently doing at Moia is that the app that I'm building is for the drivers. So basically, whenever I would go somewhere and take our vehicles, I sometimes undercover, sometimes as a product manager, I actually also tell them in advance. And I just ask questions about how their experiences are. And meaning you should basically turn every opportunity also into a user research. And that doesn't also mean that you just talk with your existing customers. Also keep in mind to be in touch with potential customers too. Existing customers might give their current pain points with the product, but by talking to potential customers, you will explore new opportunities with your product. And this could basically be anyone. If you're working on a B2C app where you know even your, let's say, parents could use, just talk with them. Talk with your friends who would be potentially using that product and understand what their pain points or gain points could be. And next is ask why. A lot of times when there are some potential problem statements come up in different settings, it can be stakeholders, it can be maybe some of the developers came up with that, or you actually found a problem statement within your KPI or in the user interviews. Most of the time, the first problem statement that is stated might not actually be the real problem. So that is why you have to dig deeper and deeper to understand what the real problem is. And when you know the real problem, then you can also identify the real solution for that. You've probably heard the 5 why technique. I definitely would suggest that you try it. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, even like a bit of overhead, but then the more you do it, you get used to it. And now I will give an example. So how this asking why worked for me. So some time ago, we delivered a new interface on our app. And then I was doing an interview with one of our drivers. And the driver said, the app became too complex. And if I wouldn't ask any more whys and try to dig deeper, basically what would happen is, the app is too complex. Let's try to make it more basic, maybe less, change the buttons, make it a bit more unified, maybe change the coloring code, etc. But then we asked basically why it became too complex. And then the answer was, I cannot access the desired information fast. And if you would stop there asking questions, then you would probably, as a solution, think about, maybe the app is not reacting fast. Maybe there's some stability issues. And then you would try to dig deeper into that and then maybe put so much effort into even identifying where it's actually being slow. But then we didn't stop. We basically asked, why again? Why do you need to have this information fast? Because, or sometimes you have to rephrase the question, of course, because they need to tap too many times to see the name of the passenger. And then the storyline has changed. So this is a navigation app where they basically drive to pick up passengers or drop off passengers. And they said they have to tap too many times to see the name of the passenger. And there we didn't even understand what the real underlying problem or what the motivation or what the pain point was. Then why do you need, so why is the problem to tap too many times to see the name of the passenger? They said, because I want to have enough time to read the names before welcoming the passenger. And then we asked again, and they said the pain point is that they feel actually stressed and ashamed about pronouncing the names of the passengers wrong. So as you can see from the very first problem statement to the last problem statement, which was actually the underlying problem, there is a huge gap. So instead of us trying to, go with the first sentence and say, oh, it's too complex, how can we make it a bit more simple? We noticed that they actually wanted to see the name of the passengers early enough, or even maybe have something that would tell out, like pronounce the names, because they actually want to have a personal greeting where they don't want to pronounce the names wrong. So you see, before you would ask why over and over again, we would have spent time on a problem that didn't exist. And next practical thing I would like to suggest is to have user flows. I don't know how many of you have used user flows or have an existing user flow. You can do it by the book, or you can also have some modifications, and however it actually would make sense for your product and your work. But the user flows, basically you draw step by step how the user goes through your product. And by doing that, you have a deeper understanding of some of the system flows, some of the potential user pain, and potential gains. Basically, this is something that I initiated also in our domain this year, because we were trying to do an ideation session for our roadmap workshop, where we noticed we cannot really pinpoint all the problems. And then just basically having this big user flow with all the stickies, we could say this, I know where the problem points are. And then where we could see all these steps, we could also put data into it and dig deeper and understand where are the flows in our product. And the last but not least, analyzing the data. Some of you might have business analysts in your team, data analysts, some of you might not. Even if you don't, try to do your best to gather the data and analyze it. Because as much as user interviews, user research gives you quite a lot of qualitative feedback, but still it's a bit different than the reality. So combining all of these and looking at the data and see where your user dropped off, where they left the cart, where they actually churn. And these ones are the most objective things that you can understand where you could focus, where the big and real problem areas are. Saying that, so I gave some examples, some hands-on, and now I would like to give few action points that I hope you would take with you from this talk. Some action points, basically, I would say for the next weeks, for any product manager here. First thing, don't underestimate the problem identification. Actually, try to spend more time, more than enough time, trying to identify the problem before you start talking about the solution with your team. Just train yourself, push yourself to dig deeper into the data, dig deeper into the user research, have user flows, and put all these efforts And then it will be clear to understand what the real problem is. And the next thing, take part in user interviews. Find a user to talk to. So you don't need to wait for a big setup for user interviews because yes, it is costly. It takes a lot of time, but just start somewhere maybe small. If you don't have any user interview the next couple of weeks, find the existing user. Can be someone from your user base, can be a friend who uses the product. Talk to them. Ask these questions, ask the questions why, and understand their problems so that you actually have the direct insight to that. And like I said, ask at least 5 times why when a problem statement arises. This can be in your next stakeholder review, can be in ideation session. It can also be in a user interview. Keep asking why the user needs that so that you have the right view for the underlying, the real problem before you actually have a wrong problem identified and then you start working on that. And lastly, create a user flow for your product. If you've never done this, there are quite a lot of resources that you can see online and try to do this on your own. You can use different tools for that, but it would give you a great overview of all these pitfalls that you have in your product. And then you can identify the potential gains and the pain points. So I hope these action points will give you some specific tasks for the next weeks. And thanks for listening. And as I mentioned, feel free to add me on LinkedIn so that we can also have some more insights together. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks very much, Asla. So what we'll do now is open it up for questions. I'll try to, if you're on Zoom, then feel free to just shout out. You can also write in the chat, same with YouTube. I'll try to ask the questions more or less in the order that they come. So don't hesitate to, yeah, just write them in. Yeah, Kazi, go right ahead.
First of all, thank you for this amazing session. Just an intro, I'm Shakib and I work for the product management cloud applications GMX and web.de as a working student. And yeah, so many a times in my previous companies also, like Scout24, I've also worked there. The problem that we used to face that when we talk about the user journey or the user flow, so I mean different parts of the user journey are with different custodians. Yeah, and many a times what happens is that the problems you are facing, or I mean the numbers that is impacting you, also had a lot to do with what other teams are doing and working. Yeah, so I was just wondering that how to actually manage that. Yeah, because the thing is that the expectations aren't from you, but you, the thing is that it also is impacted by what other teams are doing. So for example, if you are working in an e-commerce store on the checkout process, but in general, the user experience is not so good until getting the product into the basket. It also hits your KPIs. Yeah. So how to manage actually that? My question is that.
Yeah, that is a really good question. What we did basically, well, that was also one of the reasons why I initiated this user flow, because it was within an operations, so within a domain, and that has actually few components. And then everyone has their own working flows and own roadmap and backlog. So what we did is we picked up a user and not a product or not a feature area. We actually have a few user groups in our domain, and we started with one, so which was a driver for us, so the drivers who uses the app. But we did it end to end, meaning, so I just didn't put what the user goes only through my product, but also the other products. And how we did, because I can totally understand, yes, because like in a lot of products, you have end-to-end journey, but then there are actually different teams working on parts of these journeys. I think it's quite important that you first bring the understanding that, yes, it might be other, like few different teams, but at the end, it's actually a single user group. And then that brings value to your company. So I was lucky that everyone was quite open for this. And yeah, we actually worked, I think it's like 4 or 5 teams on this user flow. And that's why actually, I don't know if you saw, we had a color coding on all the steps. And every color basically means a team. And then sometimes it's even, like the blue and then red and then blue and then red. So it's actually end to end. And we try to bring everyone in for that flow and not just, sticking to silos and say like, okay, let's bring your team and then let them work on it. And that's all. Because end to end, it's a whole journey that you can improve and not just one team, basically. And it was also really cool from my experience. What I can say is that, so it was not even on the user flow that I was the only one who would point out these pain points for the product or like the part that I'm working for. It brought to such a common understanding that all the other product owners could comment on the areas that we could all together improve. I think that's really important, that we sometimes stick to our silos and our teams, and then we don't care about maybe the other things. But then when you put that whole journey on a single view or a single board, everyone becomes aligned, and then it becomes so clear to other teams also. If you cannot improve this, and then like people will not even end up in the cart anyways. So even if you're working on that very last step, I mean, the user left already because user had so many pain points until reaching there. So that is why what I would suggest is bring this idea to all the teams. What I did basically, I just went to all the POs and said, hey, like, are you interested that we build this big end-to-end user flow? And yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that all of my colleagues were quite open, because I should say we put quite a lot of effort into creating this user flow, but I could say the time we invested did pay off to understand the specific areas that we should focus.
Cool, thanks.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Asli, for the really insightful talk. I have a question regarding, you brought in the interviews and talking to the users. While I appreciated bringing in the qualitative and quantitative aspects to it, do you ever struggle with convincing others to move beyond the anecdotal evidence that you bring in? So how often does it happen to you that you need to argue for the case to be considered, even though it might be anecdotal? That would be the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so what I try to do, I mean, as much as I said this kind of guerrilla tactic that I go to the users and talk with them, but we still do as a team, actually, these interviews. But what I initiated was, and I can say that helped a lot too, because sometimes I think one of the challenges is that product manager, like herself alone, or sometimes the UX colleague or user researcher goes, but then developers are not there, because it's, like by the book, it's not really their jobs to do user interviews. But what we try to do in the team is to get everyone, each one of them, involved at least from time to time in, even if not, these like big setup user interviews, just having a chance to talk with them. Just as an anecdote again, how we did it. So we have vehicles that run around the city, and then you can book a trip, and then you share the ride. And what we did was, that's before Corona times, every week on Tuesday, we had a team lunch together. And then for team lunch, we always would book a ride and then go somewhere a bit further. And what we noticed is, like I say, sometimes we would be in disguise. We wouldn't say that we are actually from the development team. And, like you can initiate the talk or one of the devs initiate the talk. But when your user says, oh, this makes me so annoyed, like this button because it doesn't work, then your developer has actually direct feedback. So it's not really forcing them, of course. You cannot force anyone, but you can give them the opportunity to basically talk with the users. And what we did also, whenever we had these, it's quite widely organized co-creation days, where we basically, it's like 50 to 100 users who come together, and it's kind of like speed dating. We go, one by one. Then I would also ask our QA colleague, our developers to join, so that they can also talk. And the good thing is, it's this phenomenon of like 5 to 6 qualitative interviews, then you start to see the pattern. So they don't need to talk with 50 users, like after they actually talk already with 2 to 3 users, they already have sense of some of the biggest pain points. So what I can say, if, of course, like it changes from setting to setting and context to context and product to product, like I'm aware of that. But if you have a chance to be a little bit creative and try to get your developers, maybe you can also do, let's say it's a B2B product, and then you actually talk with the stakeholders on a video call or on phone, or I don't know, maybe before Corona times, you would go to their office. Maybe from time to time, ask if one of your developers want to join. I know it's perceived as having it like costly because they're supposed to develop or they're supposed to test. And why would they actually be a part of the user research? But I saw quite a lot of impact, because the moment when they feel the pain from the user, they really run back and say, oh, there's this bug we have to fix, because it's, you actually build the empathy also to the user. So that's why I would suggest not to also, don't also be the proxy between your development, like developers and QA, and then your user. If you have a chance, and of course, if they're motivated to do so, try to give them some opportunity or create the opportunities that they also have from time to time, some interface to the users. Because the more they understand the pain, the more motivated everyone, that's valid for everyone. It's the same for us, the more you actually hear pain point of a user, the more you want to go and open a ticket and put it to your roadmap. So that's why I would suggest, if you have the chance, just get your developers, get your QA, definitely your designer, of course, and understand these pain points. And if you have surveys, let's say, just make a session, make it a short summary of the main pain points that has been written there, and just go through that, I don't know, half an hour to an hour with your whole team. Yeah, I think because it's one of the most important thing is to have the empathy with the user, so that you understand the real pains that they go through. I hope that answered.
Thank you.
Thanks. I had a question. So, of course, in the ideal world, right, you want to make sure you're understanding the problem correctly and even iterating on the problem in some sense, right? Like to make sure that you're getting down to the core. But then in the real world, you also fairly or unfairly are kind of a babysitter for a bunch of developers, right? And the company, whether that's management or some other mid-level person, is going to be asking you, right? Like, well, what are they delivering? Why is there no output? How do you balance delivering stuff versus taking the time to find the right thing to work on?
No, that is definitely one of the biggest challenges, because I think it is, and I believe that, let's say, management level do not also do that on purpose, but it's this this natural achievement feeling that I mentioned. So you want to see, this feature is delivered on a continuously. But what I try to do is, that's also one of the strongest thing for a product manager, is the communication. Basically, I try to communicate also the value of this whole process to show what the real impact is. And I mean, there has been times when there was this amazing feature idea that came from someone and that really looked like an amazing feature idea. But then when you go into the data, you noticed it will not bring the impact, or the effort we will put will not bring that much impact. And then if you actually have some data or some insights from the users, then you can reflect back to, let's say, management or whoever is expecting a roadmap. And another thing that also I've seen from some of the teams is that they also put this problem and product discovery or feature discovery as an item on their roadmap, because most of the time it's also not only the product manager who will be trying to identify the problem. It will be your QA colleague, it might be your business analyst, your data analyst, and you can actually reflect that transparently and say, that you are looking to the real problem or how big the problem is. Because like I say, I mean, let's say you spend a week on understanding if that's a real problem, and then maybe a month to work on it. And then if that 1 week was not enough, and then you actually identify the wrong thing, that 1 month of work will basically be trash. So that, of course, is a tough thing, because yes, not every company, not every group, or not every manager has that perspective. But with communication, you could bring that as a transparent thing. And at some point, actually, once you have this data and the concrete plan, and not subjectively, but objectively, actually it becomes easier to convince people anyways. And that's what I try to do, is every time try to find the problems, like, hey, here is what the user said, here is what data is showing. But if you have a feature idea and you're not sure if that will have an impact, you can also communicate that transparently and say, okay, like, there's this idea, there's this feature that we want to build, but I'm not sure yet how much impact it will bring. So I need some time to dig into the data. I need some time to validate this problem statement with the users. So maybe that could be something worth trying.
Cool, thank you.
I have a question to ask.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. I'm Praneeth, and I'm a student right now. I'm doing my MBA. And right now I'm working on a product of developing a online wellness platform for yoga services, actually. And I'm a yoga trainer too. So I try to reach out to so many customers and also try to build the customer empathy, and then finally did the customer and trainer user maps, like the customer journey and the trainer journey. And then finally ended up with some insights. But I somehow feel that at a certain point, even the problem is a bit of saturated. So when I say saturated, how much ever I dig deeper into the problem, I still feel there is something more to it. And it's not clear-cutly stated by any user. I mean, the impact of the problem, is it a bigger problem or a smaller problem? That's a bit complicated to assess. Mm-hmm. So in such situations, how do you go about that? Do we have any tools or anything as such?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also, of course, it's a phenomena that this qualitative feedback or the user interviews might also be different than the reality, because, like, you basically, that user is not in exact situation where they would make a decision maybe to purchase your product. That's the common phenomena. It's one example I can give is that we did quite a bit of actually user interviews when we had the prototype for a new design. And we went and did show that to a lot of drivers, so our users basically, and then asked them to play around and then, you know, give us feedback how they feel using that feature. And basically most of them said, this is really cool, you know, like it's easy to find everything and it's very friendly, you know, I can do all the tasks easily. And then when we basically released that feature, then was exactly what I showed as the feedback. I found it too complex, they said, because that was a different situation. When we were in our office or in their like environment, you know, around a table, you're just sitting and giving feedback. But then when they started using the interface while driving, there's more pressure and it's more real world. And then it became clear that they have some other problems that they had with that design. So what you can also do is, I would suggest maybe run more rounds of user interviews with different user groups and try to, again, like use this 5 whys to understand what could be the problem. But sometimes, yes, it is hard, like exactly this example. Even if you did interview with, let's say, 20 users, which is already quite a good of an amount for a qualitative interview, you might still not have the full picture of what the real problem is. So basically what then you will have to do is you release small increments of the product and then validate if it actually solved the problem. And that was what we did. Basically, we had all these qualitative user interviews. We used the prototype and then we released it. And then we noticed that it didn't solve all the problems. And then after releasing it, basically, we did more rounds of interview where then you have, you know, like you kind of validate basically what you assumed that problem was. Because that's also part of product management. You come up with a hypothesis. And then even if you say, you know, like I understood the problem and I have the solution, you still actually keep validating that by releasing and then getting user interviews, so user feedback again. So what I would suggest, like I say, maybe you could run one more round or a few more rounds of user interview if you have the resources for that, because that also takes a lot of time. You know, you have to invest sometimes even monetarily, try to gather people to talk. But also part of the releasing small increments and then getting all this feedback, but also checking the data, because like I say, sometimes when you ask people, it's like, oh, here is the feature, would you buy that or would you use that? They just say, yeah, sure, of course, like it looks quite cool. But then in reality, maybe they don't even have time to use that because it doesn't really solve any problem that they had. So that's what I would suggest, basically a combination of more user interviews and then releasing and validating if that actually did solve that problem or if that was actually the real problem.
Right, thanks. That helps. And the five whys is an interesting technique. I would definitely try that.
Cool. I'm glad that you can take something with you after this talk and try.
I also don't want to, I think you can't see these comments. So there's also, these aren't questions, but comments like thanks, simple and straightforward. Thank you, Asli. Thank you very much for the presentation and the QA. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. So not questions, but want to make sure that you also heard the praise.
Thanks for that. Yeah, because I just see the Zoom at the moment.
Do we still have time for one question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. I have a bit of a specific problem, but I'm just wondering if maybe you have some suggestions. So I work for a very traditional company, which has been around for 30 years. And so there's a huge amount of domain knowledge and expertise there. And the issue I'm having right now with this MVP I'm building is that the stakeholders are saying, you don't need to talk to users because we know. So we know this is what we need the product to do, which, I mean, I would use that obviously, but it's not just that, but they're blocking access to real users out of fears of like cannibalism with other products and things like that. So they're afraid that me talking to users and word getting around would potentially endanger other aspects of the business, which is also a legitimate concern. And I'm just wondering if I'm trying to figure out how I could go around this and get some access to some real users and do some user research without endangering any other parts of the business and going behind obviously stakeholders' backs and things like that. I'm just wondering if you have any experience or any ideas about going about this.
Yeah. I mean, I should say, honestly, I haven't worked in a company which existed for like 10, 15 years even. But yes, I mean, I heard that being definitely a problem. But what I would actually suggest maybe to communicate that actually user needs change. Because, I mean, technologies change, life changes. Just imagine, like probably if Zoom would have some user interviews 3 years ago, well, I don't even know how old they are as a company, we would definitely come up with different problem statements because we wouldn't use this for probably that extensively. So and especially digital products, they change extremely fast. So actually, it doesn't mean that 2 years ago, a user said, hey, here are like some pain points that I have, which might be valid for that point. But then 2 years after, it might actually look like complete something else. And then maybe you have new technologies that you could come up with new solutions. I can totally understand though, if it's a very, structure that basically settled over the years, that it might definitely be tough. But maybe you could bring the others and first explain how the value could be. I mean, I understand, some maybe product managers or some teams feel like, okay, we've been doing this, we know what we're doing. That might definitely be the mindset. But I would suggest just bring them the perspective that it's not about, like we're doing something wrong or our product is bad, but maybe the user needs have changed. So it's not that we are doing a bad job, but maybe the solutions that we build doesn't really solve the problems anymore, or the problems have changed.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, imagine 3 years ago, what your expectation was from some of the apps that you were using. And all these technologies changed, because the apps and the digital products also even changes how we behave. And that is why I think it's extremely important that taking feedback, not even every year, I would say maybe every quarter if you have the chance. Because, so products change so fast, our lives have changed so fast, and especially at the moment, drastically. I think it is important to understand if the problems, the pain points have changed, and to validate if they still exist. Because imagine maybe you are sustaining some features which was solving great problems 2 years ago, but maybe is not even used that much anymore. So maybe what you can also communicate is that you don't want to change any of the working system, nothing, but you would like to validate if that problem still exists, so that you actually put the right focus to right areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think we have time maybe for one last question. Anybody has one? If not, that's also fine. In that case, yeah, I think, hold on one second, I'm supposed to share this last slide. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Asli, for the really nice presentation and nice Q&A. Join us again next week. Also get in touch with us through our Telegram and Patreon. And yeah, thanks again for coming, and enjoy your evenings or afternoons, depending on where you are.